Okay, so this is the last lecture in the series on buck converters. Last time we had discussed the triangle wave oscillator, and we had seen that this is an oscillator that is not easy to build in an actual circuit. So today we'll discuss how to design the sine wave oscillator, and that will be the end of all the blocks in this buck converter. So let us start. We'll start with the theory. You remember the classic negative feedback loop equation, VO over Vs is equal to A over 1 plus A beta. Now let us write VO and actually all the terms explicitly in showing the frequency dependence, because all of them are potentially frequency dependent. So you say VO j omega is equal to A j omega by 1 plus A j omega beta j omega into Vs j omega. Beta often is a function of omega, often it is not. In most feedback applications it is not, but in a sinusoidal oscillator it is going to be. Okay, of course A times beta being a complex quantity, it has a magnitude and a phase, as you recall from last semester. Also, you remember from whenever that typically the gain of an amplifier is a low pass, sometimes a band pass, but definitely a function that has a magnitude that reduces at higher frequencies. So whether it's a low pass or a band pass, at high frequencies the gain A of the amplifier reduces as a function of frequency. Now let us consider this possibility, a very real possibility, that at some frequency omega 0, some large frequency omega 0, consider the possibility that the quantity A j omega 0 and beta j omega 0 becomes equal to minus 1. So as we said, at high frequencies the gain reduces. At some point the gain is going to become 1 and then become less than 1 after that frequency. So let us say that at some frequency the gain becomes, the magnitude becomes 1 when its phase is 180 degrees. The gain of course will become 1 at some frequency, but what we are saying is that possibility that when the gain becomes 1, its phase is 180 degrees, so that the quantity A beta becomes minus 1. So what happens then? You will go back to this equation here, A over 1 plus A beta. So A beta becomes equal to minus 1. So we get this A over 1 minus 1 into Vs. What does this mean? The denominator has 1 minus 1, which is 0, and therefore the output would become infinite. But of course this cannot happen in real circuits. But the case that we are interested in is the case where we take this feedback circuit, we force or design for a condition where A beta becomes equal to minus 1 at some frequency, and we don't apply any input. So Vs is 0, no input. If that is the case, then we get a 0 by 0, a 0 by 0. Mathematically, of course, this is meaningless, but it turns out that in circuits, this has a very real output. So here is what happens. In circuits, this leads to the possibility that the output of the circuit is non-zero at the frequency omega, even with a 0 input. So when going back, if Vs is 0 and if this condition is satisfied, then the output can be finite at that frequency omega 0, because of course only at omega 0 is this condition satisfied. And now you recall from last semester that when we are talking about the frequency omega 0, we are talking about, there is an implicit assumption that this is the frequency of a sinusoidal signal. That comes from our theory of last semester. So we say that if we design a feedback circuit where this condition is satisfied at some frequency omega 0, then that circuit will provide an output at that frequency omega 0. And that output will of course be a sinusoidal output, because by definition this condition is satisfied for a sinusoidal frequency which is omega 0. So this circuit will exhibit a sinusoidal output with no input signal applied. This circuit is called a sinusoidal oscillator, a circuit that exhibits a sinusoidal output with no input applied is called a sinusoidal oscillator. Okay. Of course, one must remember that we are not applying an input, which is a signal, to this circuit, but some DC power has to be applied, because if the circuit is going to have voltages and currents flowing in it and show a sinusoidal output, obviously there has to be a source of power. But this circuit basically takes in DC power and outputs sinusoidal voltages. The condition A j omega 0 times B beta j omega 0 equal to -1 is called the Barkhausen criterion for oscillation, named after the engineer Barkhausen, who first wrote it down. Now remember, or let us note specifically, that in negative feedback amplifiers as opposed to oscillators, so we've seen a lot of negative feedback circuits last semester. If this condition is met, and it is possible that this condition will be met because this is a condition that could be met in any negative feedback circuit, then the output of the amplifier will show sinusoidal oscillations independent of the input. So whether there is an input or not, the output will be a sinusoidal signal at frequency omega 0. For an amplifier, we definitely do not want this to happen, because for an amplifier we want the output to be an amplified version of the input. But if an amplifier shows a sinusoidal oscillation at frequency omega independent of the input, it has stopped being an amplifier. It has actually become an oscillator. So for amplifiers, one says that if this condition is satisfied, that the amplifier has become unstable. And we do not want amplifiers to be unstable. So amplifiers have to be designed carefully to make sure that they do not become unstable. For oscillators, we deliberately design them to become unstable so that they produce a sinusoidal output. For amplifiers, we want to make sure, and we'll see this later in the semester, how to make sure that amplifiers do not satisfy this condition and therefore remain stable. Okay, this is a very brief description of the theory of sinusoidal oscillations. It is extremely brief. The phenomenon of instability and oscillations is very complex. But I'm not going to talk about this today in this lecture. I'm hoping that when you listen to this lecture and think about it, you will have a lot of questions, and I want you to raise them on LMS. Once you raise them, we'll discuss them either on LMS or maybe another lecture, or maybe we'll see. We'll have a Zoom session. For now, we'll apply this principle and design an actual circuit that works as a sinusoidal oscillator for our buck converter. Of course, sinusoidal oscillators are some of the most widely used circuits in electronics. You can imagine that every communication circuit, every mobile phone does some signal modulation, and any signal modulation requires an oscillator. So all mobile phones have at least one, probably more oscillators in it. At least one sinusoidal oscillator, and they are all based on the Barkhausen criterion. And there are a large number of different circuits therefore that have been designed over the last, in fact, almost 80 to 100 years that work as sinusoidal oscillators. The one we'll study very briefly is called the Wien-Bridge oscillator, which is a nice simple circuit, and it was designed more than 80 years ago. Here is a nice little bit of information I found on Wikipedia, so I'll just read it out. William Hewlett along with David Packard co-founded Hewlett-Packard, and Hewlett-Packard's first product was the HP200A, a precision Wien-Bridge oscillator. The first sale was in January 1939. You of course all know HP. So the first product of HP was a Wien-Bridge oscillator. So we'll study this circuit, and that will become the oscillator for the buck converter. Okay, so here is the Wien-Bridge circuit. So it has an amplifier. For us, we'll use an op-amp. Of course, remember when Hewlett and Packard designed this circuit in 1937, there were no op-amps. In fact, there were no transistors. Transistors were invented in 1947. So they used vacuum tubes as amplifiers here, but the circuit was the same. So it has a that R2 by R1, which is a negative feedback loop here. The Wien-Bridge also has a positive feedback which goes to the positive terminal. Eventually the effect is that of a feedback, and we'll see the equation in a minute. For now, I have put an input here because what we'll do is we'll write the expression for the transfer function VO by Vin, and then of course we'll make Vin 0 eventually. So if you were to derive the transfer function of this circuit, we'll write C as 1 over j omega C, and then apply the usual op-amp theory. This negative input is equal to the positive input, and solve. And I'm not going to solve it, I'm just going to write the final expression. But before I do that, no, I think that's it. Yeah, so here is the expression. So VO is equal to minus R2 by R1 into some big thing into Vin. So if we look at the case where omega is very small, so small frequencies, this whole term becomes small compared to 1, and then we get a gain of minus R2 by R1. So at low frequencies the gain will be minus R2 by R1. We can actually see that from here in the circuit. So at very low frequencies the capacitor will act as an open circuit. So this feedback, the VO to the positive node, is open circuited. This C is open circuited. So we just have an R from the plus to ground, which doesn't do anything to the circuit. So all we have is minus R2 by R1. Of course, this is just to understand the transfer function. We're not going to use it. Okay, so anyway, here is a transfer function. So you can see that this is written in it is written in the form something divided by 1 minus A beta. This actually is a beta of the transfer function. This is the A, which is the gain. This is not in the exact form A over 1 plus A beta because of the fact that it has two feedback loops. So right now I'm not going to discuss this, but it has a generic, the structure is there, and there is a minus sign here because the beta, which is coming from this RC, two RCs, is connected to the positive terminal, and that's why the negative sign comes. So that's why this negative sign is there. Now if we simplify this and write it as a fraction of two polynomials, then this is what we'll get. And what we are interested is the condition where the denominator of this transfer function becomes 0. Because when it does become 0, then we can say that with Vin equal to 0 at some frequency omega 0, oscillations will occur. So this is easy to see. There is a real part and an imaginary part. So if the real part is 0, corresponding to omega's naught squared c squared r squared equal to 1, and if r2 by r1 is equal to 2, then the imaginary part is 0. So if we design this well, if these two conditions are satisfied, then the denominator is 0, and then the circuit will oscillate at the frequency omega naught. So in order to design this, all we need to do is make R2 by R1 equal to 2 and put whatever values of R and C we want, and then the circuit will automatically oscillate at the frequency given by this expression, that is omega naught equal to 1 by RC. So that's what happens with Vin equal to 0. So if you were to build this circuit in the lab, make Vin equal to 0, that is just ground that node and just turn power on, this circuit will oscillate at the frequency given by 1 by RC. And it's very easy to, in fact you can try this in the lab and it will work quite nicely. Okay, so here is the LT Spice schematic of that same circuit. So these I've put some values. I think this gives a frequency of 159 kilohertz. So the R and C are 1 kilo and 1.1 nano, and the gain is R2 by R1 is 2, 20 kilo ohm, 10 kilo ohm. Two things I wanted to point out is make sure that of course the power is connected. We are using plus 12 and minus 12, so we will use plus 12 and minus 12. Also use a rail-to-rail op-amp here. It is required here because we'll see that in a minute. And one more thing I want to point out is that for oscillations to start, especially in simulation, the circuit must be provided some initial energy, and that energy is what will cause oscillations. So it is important that when you simulate this circuit, you put some initial voltage. So this N004 is this node. So you put some initial voltage here as an initial condition. What that does is it puts a voltage across this capacitor C2, and if there is a voltage, that means there is some energy stored in this capacitor when the simulations begin. And it is this energy that starts the oscillations off in simulation. If you don't put this, and of course you can try it, what will happen is that everything will just remain 0 the whole time. Nothing will, all the voltages will be 0, and that's kind of an unstable DC state. But simulations can sustain unstable states also. If you build this circuit in the lab, then of course you don't need to put an initial charge on the capacitor. What happens is the circuit, because it is sitting in the lab, it picks up noise from the environment, and the noise acts as the energy, and that noise is sufficient, although it is very small, it is sufficient to start off the oscillations. So real life circuits don't need this, but simulations of course don't pick up noise, and therefore they need some initial condition. Okay, so I built this circuit and I simulated this in Spice, and this is the output I got. So the output started out nicely as a sine wave, but unfortunately it did not sustain itself. It went away. It died out as a function of time. So this is an expanded version. You can see that it is a sine wave, but the oscillations died out. Of course I knew why this was, so what I did was I increased the resistance R2. This is the resistance in the feedback loop which is determining the gain of the amplifier. So from 20 kilo ohms I made it 20.04 kilo ohms, just slightly larger, and now it is sustained itself. Beautiful. It started out and it sustained itself, and you can see an expanded version, a beautiful sine wave. So the point is that the gain in real life has to be slightly larger than 2. Why? Well, this is, as I said, this is one of the complications of sinusoidal oscillators. The answer is that the when we derived the theory on those equations, we assumed an ideal amplifier. But amplifiers are not ideal. They have nonlinearities, especially near the uh, extremes of the voltages. And nonlinearities cause the gain to go down from inside the amplifier, and that has to be compensated by this gain being slightly larger than 2. So you have to do this. You kind of play around with the value. For example, whatever value you use for R2, increase it slightly. It doesn't need to be very high. It better not to be. In fact, this might work for 20.1 and 21 ohms, kilo ohms also. You should try it, but make it as close to the gain as close to 2 as possible. Don't make it much larger. All right, so that's one thing. The other thing is, what is the amplitude of this sinusoid? So eventually, after some transient, the output settles down to a nice sinusoid here, and now it's going to continue forever and ever. What is the amplitude? The amplitude, as you can see, is basically plus minus 12 volts. So that is the amplitude of the sinusoidal signal. Okay. So the amplitude is 12 volts. But what if we try to determine this from the equation? So here is the equation once again, and the denominator is 0, the numerator is 0, VO is 0 by 0. This equation does not tell us what the amplitude of the output signal is. There is no way, in fact, of finding the amplitude of oscillators from such what shall I say, linearized equations. Linearized equations do not tell us the amplitude, because the amplitude of sinusoidal oscillators is actually determined by the nonlinearities of the amplifier circuit. For now, all I am going to tell you is that the amplitude will be limited by the DC power supplies, and for a rail-to-rail op-amp, the output will be plus minus 12 volts. If the op-amp is not a rail-to-rail amplifier, then it will be limited by whatever is the highest voltage the op-amp can deliver, which will be listed in the data sheet. Also, note that this is just a kind of extracurricular. If the two power supplies don't have an equal magnitude, and sometimes it happens in real circuits, then the amplitude of the sine wave is smaller than either one. Again, you can try this in the simulation. It's very simple to do. Just make one of the supplies 11 volts or something. This case is extremely difficult to analyze, so we are not going to even attempt to analyze, but we should be aware that the amplitude is going to be lower than either of the supplies. Just try it and see what you get. Okay, so with this you are ready to work on the final part of the buck converter assignment. For the oscillator, you can use the same op-amp. Well, okay, let me modify this statement. This is not what I want to say. What I want to say is that either you can use a triangle wave oscillator, or you can use a sinusoidal oscillator, number one. Number two, if you do use a sinusoidal oscillator, you will have to use a rail-to-rail op-amp, because you need the output of the oscillator to be plus minus 12 volts. So this statement is not correct. Maybe I will modify it. So I will say use a rail-to-rail op-amp. Okay, that's better. That's better. Okay, the deadline for submission is Thursday, April 23rd. So today is April 7th. I'm taping this lecture on April 7th. No, that's not relevant, but you have a lot of time to do this assignment. All right. So this is part 1 actually of my lecture on April 9th, which is I'm going to do one more lecture for the April 9th, more on positive and negative feedback. Acha, one more thing I wanted to say about this assignment, this simulation. If you are unlucky when you put in this what's it called, the sinusoidal oscillator in your full buck converter, the complete circuit may not converge. So what it will do is, when you start running the simulation, it will just keep on simulating and simulating. It will not give an output at all. This can happen for many reasons. One possible reason is that the oscillator, as we saw, takes some time to reach steady state. So let me just go back. So this one, so here this oscillator is taking some time to reach its steady state here at 12 volts. Till then it is only 4 volts, the amplitude. And this may confuse the rest of the negative feedback of the buck converter. That buck converter then may not reach steady state because the oscillator is keeping on changing its amplitude. It simply doesn't converge. One trick to avoid this problem is, what you do is you put some ideal switches in the circuit, so that what you do is you let the oscillator start first, simulate, and once the oscillator, so let me go back again here. So what you do is you start the simulation, you have some switch, and you will have, once you have designed the oscillator, you will know, for example, that the oscillator is taking, let us say, some 8.5 milliseconds to reach its final steady state. So what you do is you have a switch that connects this oscillator to the input of the buck converter, to that comparator, the input of the comparator, only at 8.5 milliseconds. Till then, you connect the input of the comparator to ground, so that the buck converter feedback loop just doesn't do anything. It is just sitting idle until the oscillator is connected to it. And so you have switches, so that the switch connects the comparator input to 0 for the first 8.5 milliseconds, and 8.5 milliseconds in this specific case, the comparator output gets connected to the oscillator, and then it will simulate the rest of the circuit, and hopefully that will work. Alright, so this is the end of this lecture.